Hi, Tony. You are not audible.
Oh, sorry. Good morning, good morning, good morning. Can everybody hear me? If you can
Yes,
hear
I
me,
can hear you.
just type a Y in the chat box. I forgot I was muted. All right, I see a Y. Okay, good, 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 good. Awesome, 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 awesome. Okay, so just give me a sec. How is the weather where we are? Nigeria is quite humid. Okay, so this morning we are having a conversation on data, right? Well, data privacy, precisely. Right. In the in the build up for today's session, I had put out a post on LinkedIn titled Data, the New Oil. For those of us who follow me on LinkedIn, you may have read that post. And in that post, I tried to draw parallels between data and crude oil, right? And the prime position that data has taken in today's digital economy. It's what's fueling emerging innovations like AI and tons of digital products and services offered by organizations, right? Data, data. Now, while we remain fascinated by the tons of businesses enabled by data, there's a fresh risk that introduces to the digital ecosystem. Data privacy risks, for instance, which again needs to be managed, right? We're not about to throw away the baby and the bathwater. So today, I doubt that there is, or maybe just a few, but a good number of developed or emerging markets have enacted one law or the other to help manage the risks posed by data privacy. Two of such regulations that we'll be looking at this morning will be the General Data Protection Regulation, which is the GDPR, and the Nigeria Data Protection Act, right? The underlying theme behind these two, or most of the data privacy regulations you'll find, is the fact that we're trying to empower users, data owners, right? And trying to minimize the possibility of data misuse. So we have two brilliant minds to take this conversation further. Our first speaker, a friend of mine, Uzoma, is a data privacy enthusiast and an IT security and IT risk professional. He's got over 10 years experience supporting a digitally secure ecosystem. He has provided these services across several international banks. He's a CISA, he's an ISMS and a BCMS lead auditor, among several other certifications that he possesses. Our second speaker is under brilliant mind, Bukola. Bukola is a data privacy consultant, a service that she has provided again for several international organizations. She currently serves in the same capacity at an international bank in Nigeria with subsidiaries across several African countries and the UK. She is a CISA, she's a certified data protection officer, as well as an ISMS and a BCMS lead implementer. So I dare say that we are in good hands this morning. So a bit of an outline, right? So this is our outline for today. Uzo will run us through the tenets of the GDPR, the consequences for non-compliance. Bukola will bring the conversation home by expanding on the NDPA and some pitfalls organizations have experienced with privacy implementation. I'll come back to discuss the career path for intending privacy practitioners and then share a couple of tools that you find useful in maintaining compliance in your organization. My name is Tony Ayuno, and I'm your anchor for today's session. So, Uzo, if you're ready, is Uzo with us?
Yes, I am, Tony. Thank you so much for
Um,
the kind introduction. Thank you everyone for joining us today. So I'll just share my screen. Okay. Please confirm that you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you once more for joining us. And we're going to be discussing data privacy. So I'll take you through the GDPR and consequences of non-compliance. We will look at some big fines that have been issued to a lot of big companies. And then we'll look at 10 steps that you can take to be GDPR compliant. As you know, data is the new oil because data is fueling an increasing number of businesses across the world. Personalized customer experiences, targeted marketing, science-driven insight all depend on the volume and quality of the information. A lot of companies are quite eager to get data because it is big money for them. They make money through advertising, right? So data privacy is very important to us because it protects our personal integrity. It encourages trust in digital interactions. And of course, it promotes our fundamental rights as individuals around this data-driven world. Basically, what we're saying is that data privacy puts power in the hands of the data owner. Let's take a look at the business of personal data, right? Big companies like Google, Facebook, they make a lot of money, right? They've made a lot of money by advertising, using people's personal data to send them ads, so they use all these sophisticated surveillance-based ad systems to track your behavior online, so they can send you ads and make a lot of money, right? European Consumer Organization has accused Facebook over the years of collecting unnecessary amounts of information from their users so they can send you ads, things like your sexual orientation, things like your emotional state. They want to know how you feel, your susceptibility to addiction. These are not things necessary for the services they are rendering to you. And it's important that we understand these things because this is more like manipulation. They make you keep clicking away and they make money off you. These are against principles of data protection, which we'll be looking at. One of them is purpose limitation, but I will get to that. Even in the US elections, it was heavily influenced by exploiting the personal data of voters. Both the Trump and Biden administration are guilty of this. They use personal data to make money for their campaigns. Things like your voter history, party registration, these are public records that are easy to get. Even your social media posts and your interactions online, these things are easy to get. The administrations had mobile apps that could track your device's location history, even get your phone ID, as far as getting your contact details, your contact list, so they could, get new voters, persuade their base to vote, and all this to win election. They were using personal data to make a lot of money during their campaigns. The Trump administration was involved in one of the biggest data breaches that Facebook, formerly Facebook Meta, has seen in the world, where they had this data analytics firm that also played a part in the winning Brexit campaign. They harvested millions of Facebook user profiles so they could build a powerful software that could help them predict or influence the choices of people at the ballot box. You can see how powerful personal data is, and it's very important for us to understand this. It's very important for us to understand data privacy. So let's talk about the GDPR. So why was the GDPR formed, right? Now, prior to the formation of the GDPR, there's what we call the Data Protection Directive. It was enacted in 1995. It was a regulation. It was a directive, right? And it allowed the 28 European Union states to kind of develop their own privacy laws, to tailor the needs of their people. Now, but this directive had a shortfall. It wasn't taking care of technological advancements as to how data is collected in our world today, how it is stored, how it is transferred. So the GDPR, which is the General Data Protection Regulation, was adopted in 2016. It came into effect in May 25th, 2018, and it came into effect to harmonize data privacy laws across Europe and to protect the EU citizens, residents, and to also reshape the way organizations handle data privacy. So it basically came in effect to give power to the data owner. The GDPR applies, and it's a very strict, it's a legal framework, and it's a very strict framework, in which if you don't comply to the GDPR, you will be heavily fined. They're very strict about the guidelines. The GDPR applies to all businesses and organizations that are responsible for handling personal data in the European Union and even in the UK. And any organization using data that's collected within a participating state. So even if you are not resident in the EU, but you have some business with an organization resident in the EU, you must comply to the GDPR. Let's quickly take a look at the rights of data subjects. This is very important. It's very important that people know their rights. You have the right to be informed. At any point in time, you have the right to understand what the data controller or processor is doing with your information. You have the right to access your information at any point in time. You have the right to correct any information you feel is not accurate. You have the right to object to the processing of any information. Maybe you don't want them to process your information any further. Maybe they want to use your email. Maybe you applied for some competition and the competition is over. You have the right to say, stop using my data for anything. Or you subscribe to some newsletter. You have the right to say, don't use my information for anything else except this newsletter service I have requested from you. You have the right to restrict processing. You have the right to data portability. You can request for your data from any data controller at any point in time and transfer it to another data controller of your choice. You have the right to be forgotten. You can't say, please erase my data. You have the right in relation to automated decision making and profiling. Now, something like, like a credit administration process where you have automated processing, which is like processing where without human interaction. You have the right to not be subject to any decision making that doesn't have a human interaction in it. You can request to have a human intervention in that processing. These are 8 rights of data subjects that's very important for us to know. Now, let's quickly look at 7 principles of data protection. This is very important. Principle 1, lawfulness, fairness, and transparency. Now, this principle speaks to you having valid and legal basis for processing, for collecting, processing, or storing any personal data that of a data subject. You must be transparent. You must be fair. If it is a newsletter, you must explain. You have valid reasons for collecting that data. If you do not have valid reasons, if there are any breaches to the law, if you are collecting data in an unlawful way, you will be fined. Down the line, we will see how a lot of big companies were fined for not adhering to this principle of lawful basis for collection of personal data. You have to be transparent. We'll also see fines given to companies for not being transparent enough in how they're processing the data of their data subjects. Purpose limitation, simply put, do not use the data subject's personal data for anything other than the service you are rendering. We'll also see where companies will collect the personal data of people and try to use it for things that are incompatible with the purpose they initially requested that data for. You will see big fines given to companies for their lack of adherence to the purpose limitation principle. Data minimization, simply put, don't collect more than you need for the service you are rendering. The personal data shall be adequate, relevant, and limited to what is necessary in relation to the purpose for which they are processed. Don't collect more than necessary. Don't begin to ask me my sexual orientation. What do you need it for? I only asked you to be part of your newsletter, and you're asking me for my religious beliefs. You don't need that information. Accuracy. It says data shall be accurate where necessary and kept up to date. Don't keep outdated information in your database. And for the data subject as well has the right to request that his data be edited or corrected if he finds the data to be inaccurate. Data storage limitation. Simply put, don't retain the data longer than necessary for the service you are rendering. We will see a company that was fined for storing data, for violating this storage limitation. If you are, for instance, you're asking people to register for a competition and they give you their data, when that competition ends, delete the data. You don't need to store the data longer than it's necessary. Don't keep data. A lot of times people say, oh, let's just keep it just in case. That storage limitation takes care of that idea of keeping data just in case. Integrity and confidentiality. What it says here is that personal data shall be processed in a manner that ensures appropriate security of the personal data, including protection against unauthorized or unlawful processing and against accidental loss, destruction, or damage, using appropriate technical organizational measures. What we're saying here is put measures in place, both technical and organizational measures, to ensure the integrity and confidentiality of the personal data. You must ensure that there's no unauthorized or unlawful processing of data going on. You must ensure that the data you collected is not damaged or destroyed, or there's any accidental loss. You might want to look at things like encryption in your company. You might want to have things like firewalls. The last principle is accountability. It says the controller shall be responsible for and be able to demonstrate compliance with the data protection principle. So you must be responsible by virtue of collecting personal data. You are responsible. You must be accountable. Now let's look at consequences of non-compliance. Simply put, you will lose a lot of money. You will be fined if there are data breaches. If there's any theft to sensitive information, such as trade secrets, right? You could have big negative publicity, reputational damage. Of course, you will lose your customer trust. If you're a resident in the in Europe, and maybe you want to apply for some contract, if you're not compliant to the GDPR, you could lose opportunities. Of course, you will be fined. I've said that. When there are administrative audits and it's discovered that you're not compliant, you will be fined. You will be fined, and it's not small money. We'll see big money. Companies like Facebook have been fined as much as 1.2 billion. 1.2 billion euros. That's a huge fine for Meta. And of course, if you don't put measures in place, things like the principles of integrity and confidentiality, you're liable to data breaches because you don't have these measures in place, and you could be subject to cyber attacks, things like that. Just like I've been saying, big companies that have been fined a lot of money. Now let's look at some of the companies. Very interestingly, that were fined in 2023. Meta was fined 1.2 billion in Ireland for breaching the principle of lawfulness. So they were transferring European Facebook data to the United States without adequate data protection mechanisms. We've talked about lawfulness, understanding the GDPR principles. Amazon was fined $866 million. This is huge money. Luxembourg, for violating the purpose limitation principle. They were collecting personal data and using it for advertisements. And GDPR is very strict on those principles. They were given this heavy fine in Luxembourg. Meta again. So the first one happened in May. They had one prior to that happened in January, where they also breached the principle of lawfulness and fairness, where they were forcing users to agree that their data will be used for personalized and behavioral assessments. So they added this new clause to their terms and agreements, where basically they're forcing you to agree that your data will be used for personalized and behavioral assessments. And this is against the fairness principle and lawfulness. TikTok, interestingly, in UK was fined 14.5 million. They were also fined in Ireland about 345 million euros for breaking the principle of lawfulness. They allowed children under the age of 13 to create accounts on their platform. And they also improperly processed children's data in Ireland, where they had content that was made for the public, that videos being sent to the children's accounts. And these videos had been categorized as public, some of them as adult and all of that. And they didn't get, they breached the law and the principle of GDPR, and they were fined heavily. TikTok. WhatsApp, interestingly, was fined 5.5 million in Ireland because the customer complained. A customer who knew his rights complained that they're forcing him to give consent. So they had this update to their terms and agreements. And if you don't accept it, you're not going to be given access to that service. And they breach lawfulness and fairness. So you can see how power is going to the people. And you can see how a lot of these fines are coming from, breaching principles of the GDPR or lawfulness. It's not fair. You're using it for something else. Look at Criteo in France was fined 40 million euros for targeted advertising. So they get your information and they begin to send you ads because they want to make money. These ads are big money for these companies. Big money. Spotify was not transparent enough in Sweden. They didn't inform users of how their data will be used. We've talked about you have to let people know. I'll show you 10 steps that you can use to comply to GDPR. GDPR is very strict. It could be a bit challenging sometimes. You need a data privacy officer, a data protection officer in your organization to guide you through. GDPR implementation. It's very, very important that you have this. We'll be looking at it very shortly. Google was fined 50 million euros, and this is all big, big, big money for not being transparent enough, for not adhering to purpose limitation principle. They were sending personalized ads again. Amazon was fined for storing data that they didn't need, 32 million euros in France. You know, H&M were fined for not adhering to integrity and confidentiality principle of data protection. So they had this technical error in their organization. And all the data in the company's network drive was not accessible to everybody. They didn't put security measures in place, technical and organizational measures in place to secure the personal data of people. There was unauthorized access to personal data of people. They were fined. British Airways as well was fined. Yes, British Airways was fined 22.4 million in the UK for breaching integrity and confidentiality principles. So their website was redirecting people to a hacker website. You can imagine that they did not ensure proper security of the personal data of their data subjects. Now, how can you comply to the GDPR? 10 steps. I'll try to run you through these steps. You have to ensure lawfulness and transparency of data processing. We can't emphasize this enough. Please, you must have a legal basis for collecting any personal data. You must inform them why you are collecting the data. You must be transparent. You must tell them how you're going to process that data, or you will be fined. Please, you must adhere to these principles. You should have a data protection policy. It will help you a lot. Let this policy unify other security policies in your organization. Design it to have privacy by design principle. Also embed the rights of the data subject in the policy and make your policy readily available. Very important. You must conduct a data protection impact assessment. You must do a risk assessment of the personal data you are collecting, the effect on the data subject, and the effect on you as well as you're processing the data. This is why you need a data protection officer. It's very, very important to have a data protection officer in your organization because he will guide you, he will handhold you through this process of complying to the GDPR. I will serve as a focal point between you and the data protection authorities. He will give you that necessary awareness that you need. He will also help you through the impact assessments, as we've said, and just be that go-to person for anything pertaining to privacy laws in your organization. We've talked about implementing proper data security measures. This is kind of part of the principle of integrity and confidentiality. You must have technical and organizational measures in place to ensure that there's no unauthorized or unlawful processing, or there's no damage or destruction to personal data that you've collected. You must document your GDPR compliance journey. Document it, document all these things, document the security measures you put in place, document the contact details of your controller, your data protection officer, document the results of your data protection impact assessment, document your data protection supervisory authority, document your legal basis for processing personal data. Document how data flows in your organization. List out all the processes that have personal data activities in them. It's very important that you know all the processes in your organization that have personal data activities, list them out. so you can know the risks you face at every point in time. Report data breaches promptly. Within 72 hours, please take note, within 72 hours, you should report any data breach unless it has no adverse effect on the rights or freedoms of the data subject. 72 hours. You must report the data breach to your data supervisory authority. You're a controller, you're a processor, you must report the data breach. And continuously educate your staff on data processing. Awareness is a very big deal in data protection. People need to know their rights, and you need to continuously tell them about their rights. Ensure user privacy rights. Yes. We've talked about what the rights of the user are. You must continuously ensure that people at any point in time can request for the information they know. You must be transparent. Let them know what you're doing with their personal data. Let them be able to say, okay, stop processing this data at this time. Don't retain the information longer than you need it. Don't take more than you need, because the more you take, the more you increase your risk profile. Take just what you need for the service. And with these 10 steps, you should be able to comply to the GDPR. Okay, so I'll let Kola take over from here. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Uzoma. So I think we'll just hold off with